students?
The space for grandparenting,
Yes.
is until April 1st of next year.
Right.
And it's easier to get in by grandparenting than any other way.
Yes.
Number two, if you don't do it, it depends on the type of work you're doing. If the Controlled Act comes in and you're doing anything that matches what the legislation says is psychotherapy, you'll have to stop.
Oh.
It'll be illegal for you to work.
Okay.
So this is why you need to be looking at this today.
Absolutely. Okay.
But don't panic about it. Typically, everybody who goes through this goes through massive anxiety, and the cost is just what it is. That's something we can't, they set their fees.
Why is, I mean, teachers here that I work with at the college, their fees, to members, to be a member of the College of Teachers is, a third or a quarter of the cost. Why is it?
Because there's a lot more teachers. I've been sitting in on the council meetings for about 5 years as an observer, out of interest, because I knew that this was coming and I did not want to go into panic and anxiety about it. I did anyway. I was triggered right up to my eyeballs a lot of the time.
Okay, so as I was saying, I'm Monica McPherson. I'm the manager of registration here at the college. I have with me today Alison, who is one of our registration assistants. We've got a team of 9 who work through the process of screening the applications for registration. So there isn't really a lot I can say about the Controlled Act. I know that some of the questions that Liesl provided, the advanced questions, focused on the Controlled Act, but we can't really go into substantive detail about the impact, the full impact of that, until the ministry decides and let us know, so then we can update stakeholders. So as I said earlier, and I'm not sure if everybody caught that, but the Psychotherapy Act and the Controlled Act are 2 different things. The Controlled Act is actually part of the Psychotherapy Act. So the definition of the Psychotherapy Act remains the same. What we're waiting for is the clarification statement from the ministry as to the direction that they wish us to go, and that additional information that we can communicate and share with stakeholders about the Controlled Act and its implications. Okay. What are counsellors, not RPs, still allowed to do without the Controlled Act? So once the Controlled Act is proclaimed, unregulated practitioners will be able to do everything that they do now except the Controlled Act. As I said, the purpose of the clarification statement that we're waiting for from the ministry, it will help to clarify the meaning of that, but unregulated practitioners can't use the restricted title, so registered psychotherapist or psychotherapist, and they can't hold themselves out as qualified to practice psychotherapy in Ontario. So our advice around this basically is that anyone who is sort of working within the scope should consider either registering with CRPO or one of the other 5 colleges if you meet the registration requirements. After the Controlled Act comes into effect, it may affect what you can do in terms of, once legislation comes into being, the definition of the Controlled Act may remain the same, and if it does, then it will mean that you can't treat individuals who have serious disorders using psychotherapy techniques. And if I have the definition here of the Controlled Act, just as a reminder to everyone. So the Controlled Act is, the full wording of the Act is, in the course of engaging in the practice of psychotherapy, a member is authorized, subject to terms, conditions, and limitations imposed on his or her certificate of registration, to treat, by means of psychotherapy technique delivered through a therapeutic relationship, an individual's serious disorder of thought, cognition, mood, emotional regulation, perception, or memory that may seriously impair the individual's judgment, insight, behavior, communication, or social functioning. So if that legislation is proclaimed in the exact same format, then clients who aren't registered with CRPO or one of the other 5 colleges won't be able to treat clients who have serious disorders.
Okay.
It's the penultimate of the advanced questions that I have here, is, will the proclamation of the Psychotherapy Act limit access to mental health services in general? If not, what is CRPO's plan to prevent disruption of services? So CRPO was created by legislation enacted by the government. So it really wasn't meant to restrict services, but to ensure that we have qualified mental health professionals available to treat and provide services to clients. So currently the position is that insurance companies are increasing their coverage of psychotherapy services. I know not all do, and we're hoping that will change as time goes by. But that in itself, the fact that they're willing now to cover some services that weren't previously covered, should increase the access to the services. But in terms of any wider or deeper plan than that, that would really be a question for the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. As I said, it was never the intention to limit services. It's just about ensuring that people who access services have access to qualified professionals. Of the advanced questions we have, there are a couple of other questions. In terms of the psychotherapy programs that are acceptable to CRPO, Alison has a list.
Yeah, so all 6 of the programs that are recognized now with the CRPO are listed on the CRPO website. It includes the Canadian Institute for Child and Adolescent Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy. They have a diploma program for child and adolescent psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and that diploma program is recognized. Another program is the 5-year training program from the Gestalt Institute of Toronto. The OISE program, the Masters of Education in Counseling Psychology, only the stream in counseling and psychotherapy is recognized at this point in time. The Toronto Institute for Relational Psychotherapy, it's also known as TERP, that diploma in relational psychotherapy is recognized. The University of Guelph Masters of Science program in couple and family therapy, that program is recognized. And finally, the Yorkville University Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology, that program is recognized. Those 6 programs are the only programs that are recognized and automatically accepted through the regular route for education and training purposes only. However, if you complete a program that's not on the recognized list, you can still be accepted into the college, and we'll go through that when we answer the next question. competencies. So there are a very high number of competencies, about 22, that we assess. All of those competencies are listed on the CRPO website. Under the education and training subsection, you'll see something that says competency profile. That competency profile is a list of all the competencies that your program needs to train you on. And if your program is not recognized, you'll be asked to complete a mapping tool, which connects each course that you completed to the competencies. If we find that all of the competencies have been covered in the courses that you completed in your non-recognized program, we can accept the education and training, and you would move forward in the registration process. I can give you an example for competency 1.3, for example. One of the competencies assesses whether or not you have an understanding of the DSM-4 disorders and psychoactive drugs, whether or not you have a familiarity with them. So what you'll do in the mapping tool, you'll say, I took a course in psychopathology. Here's my course outline. This is what I learned about the DSM disorders. This is what I learned about psychoactive drugs. And therefore, I feel that I've been trained on that, on having knowledge in that competency, that knowledge of psychoactive drugs and DSM disorders. And that will be assessed when we look at your course outlines. We follow up on the learning activities that you completed to determine whether or not you actually gain that knowledge from that course. In the regular route, you will not get your full RP title once you're first admitted to it. So it's a two-stage process, really. The first stage, you just need to complete a minimum hour requirement, clinical hour requirement, and you're admitted as long as you completed that hour requirement and your educational requirements. Following being admitted to that qualifying category, as we call it, you then need to complete the remaining clinical requirements and the registration examination. So in the grandparenting route, there's no registration examination. As long as you complete all of the requirements, you get your RP title. In the regular route, you need to complete a registration examination and additional clinical requirements in order to get that full RP title.
If not registered and decide to continue counselling practice, how would I differentiate serious conditions from non-serious? Is there a legal definition? There isn't a legal definition. The college has been advised by legal counsel that we don't define legislation. So you have to use your professional judgment to determine what's serious against what's non-serious. Okay.
So another question is, if I have the education and training completed but not the 1,000 hours or DCC, can I apply through the grandparenting route before April 2017? So ultimately, if you are applying in grandparenting, you don't need 1,000 direct client contact hours. That's for independent practice. To apply, the minimum requirement for grandparenting is 800 hours of direct client contact, and then you also have your 40 hours of clinical supervision, your 30 hours of SUS, and your 100 hours of education. That's in addition to your currency requirements as well. So at this point in time, it doesn't take a matter of a few weeks. It can take months.
Yep, 3 months, sometimes more.
Yeah, and that's for both routes.
Yeah, for both routes.
The next question, I believe, is regarding if you have to apply through the regular route because you don't have the grandparenting requirements, and it's asking whether or not you would have to go back to take multi-year courses to learn old techniques. So just to be clear, the mapping tool that you're going to be filling out, or the requirement that you have training in all the competencies, it's not covering multiple techniques. So we're not going to require that you have training in Gestalt and art therapy and music therapies. It doesn't work like that. Ultimately, your one training program in the technique that you use should train you on those competencies if it's acceptable. The competencies are not related to multiple different techniques. It's very much related to competencies that are general across all techniques that you use.
Question from Liesel: is any member of the other regulated colleges allowed to do psychotherapy even if they have been trained for it? I'm not sure if that's meant to be have or haven't. Members of the other 5 colleges that I mentioned earlier, so the nurses, the OTs, the psychologists, the physicians and surgeons, and the social workers, their legislation permits them to provide psychotherapy services under their regulated titles. So yes, those members of those 5 colleges can, along with CRPO. Outside of that, then the answer would be no. So another question: there are many of our members who are still ambivalent about joining the college. What is the biggest advantage of joining the college as opposed to just practicing as a registered counsellor? Well, in terms of provision of services, members of the public, we have a public register. Once you're approved as a member of the college, we have a public register where we place your details. So that means that anybody, anywhere, but particularly within Ontario, if they're looking for a psychotherapist, they can look and check the register to see if they find your name somewhere online or on a flyer or something, and they wish to approach you. They can check that they're getting services from someone who is qualified and has met certain minimum standards and will be involved in a process of quality assurance, continuing professional development and education. So that's one of the primary benefits, is ensuring that clients have access to qualified professionals.
And as I understand it as well, a lot of employers, a lot of clients themselves are contacting the college because they want to hire people who are registered and regulated health professionals. They also want to seek counseling services from people who are regulated and registered because they know that they've had to go through certain levels of scrutiny, that they require certain levels of experience. And so for that reason, I think it's also opened the window for a lot of people to have better employment opportunities and for clients to be able to find the services that they really want. People from outside of Ontario applying to register, yes, it happens all the time. Generally, it's for people who are coming into Ontario and wish to practice within Ontario, but we also have many members outside of Ontario who are in provinces that don't have a college for psychotherapy, and they want to be regulated. They want to be a member of a regulatory body for psychotherapy, and so they request to join the college in Ontario. I mean, I can't speak to the number of people that are applying, but the process is the same unless they are a member of another college for psychotherapy in Canada. And those are called labor mobility applicants, and they complete a special application so that they're able to practice in Ontario. Being that they're already registered in another province, that's why the process is different, and there is more information about that on the website.
We currently have only 2 other provinces where psychotherapy is regulated. Quebec is one and Nova Scotia is the other. So currently they're the only practitioners from those two provinces can apply under labour mobility.
And so the related question to that, I think, is are you able to practice psychotherapy in other provinces? So ultimately, Ontario, now that it has a college, Quebec and Nova Scotia, you would need to be registered and regulated. For unregulated provinces, you can practice so long as you're abiding by the laws within that province.
Okay. Do spiritual counsellors still have exemption from the college? Yes, is the simple answer to that question. Right, okay. Question from Philip. I heard the college was expecting as many as 6,000 potential members after the grandparenting is finished. Do you have any thoughts about this? Yeah, we really don't know. At the moment, we have just over 3,200 members. That is somewhat lower than maybe our initial forecasts based on the number of people who had created accounts on our system. But we do know that some practitioners have been holding out, waiting to hear what was going to happen with the Controlled Act. And we also have the other category, the RMHT category, the Registered Mental Health Therapist category, that still has not been decided. It's been deferred. And I see another question from Philip that says, what is happening with that designation? And unfortunately, I can't add anything substantive about that. Again, that lies with the ministry, and we haven't moved forward on that issue at all.
The CRPO, has it considered and accepted international training programs? So the answer to that is yes. If you apply through the grandparenting route, we don't require that you have a World Education Services evaluation completed, but we will still assess the education. So we'll look at the breakdown of the courses. Oftentimes we'll request transcripts, and we'll follow up in terms of the nature of the courses that you completed to make sure that we can still accept them. In the regular route, we do require that you have a World Education Services or an equivalent international accreditation evaluation completed to ensure that it is a graduate level program of a certain length, and we want to determine what the Canadian equivalency of the program is. And after that, we assess it as we do any other program. We'll look at the breakdown of the courses and assess whether or not they're related to the competencies. So we've had several members approved in both routes who completed their education and training outside of Canada, and they're able to practice now as anybody else.
Right.
So there was one that's just arrived.
Right. Okay.
Counsellors, peer counsellors, crisis counsellors, working in community centres are doing psychological treatment. Is this still legal when the Controlled Act is in place?
Well, so basically, as I said earlier, in terms of the Controlled Act, there isn't a whole lot I can say. If you are treating someone with serious disorders in a psychotherapeutic relationship context, then if the Controlled Act is proclaimed in the format that I read earlier, then you won't be able to work with those clients. You will have to make transitional arrangements for them to maybe see another therapist.
Next one was if a therapist doesn't meet the 800 hours within the 2 years, are they to stop working?
Within the 2 years.
I think the grandparenting.
The grandparenting.
Right.
Right. Well, so obviously it depends what work it is they're doing. If they're doing counselling, they can continue to do that unrestricted, unlimited. If they, I mean, it depends. If they're in a process of working towards those, we might have to ask how long they think it's going to take them to accrue those hours. If they've got a really small private practice, or are they working regularly, then obviously, or with a more full-time practice, then they're likely to be able to meet those hours within a shorter time span. But obviously we haven't come up against that right now. But once you've got your application in, I said you can continue working, you'll liaise with the college, we'll communicate with you, and so you wouldn't have to just stop working on March 31st, 2017.
Okay.
Monica mentioned part of it about what's the reason for joining the college, considering the expense. And so she addressed part of that. I think a big part of it, there's two things I wanted to mention. One is a big part of it, I think, is the credibility it gives, which is more or less what Monica was addressing. That will help with things like the insurance companies, the more people that are members, all that kind of thing will gradually help us more. But the main and most immediate thing that comes to my mind that I wanted to mention was that, as I understand it, the definition of the controlled act gets kind of clarified when it goes to court. And you do not want to be the test case. So what you need to look at, I think, is the work I'm doing even possibly ever going to go down into the area that seems to be called by what's defined by the controlled act? Because if it ever does, and ever a complaint is issued, the college, I think, has no choice but to respond to complaints. You just don't want to be the test case for something like that. That could take years of time in court. It's not something you want to take a chance on. So it's well worth the insurance to look after yourself that way. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that.
Someone's asked the question, does a CRPO have a definition for counselling?
So the only definition that's kind of written down right now is the HPRAC distinction between the two. And basically it says that it's distinct from counseling because the counseling is more focused on information, advice giving, encouragement, instruction. Also, there's not much of an establishment of a therapeutic relationship there. And that's the definition also does include some spiritual counseling, but as we mentioned, it is exempt, and we have been accepting spiritual counseling hours based on how people define their work. So we always follow up. We want to understand whether or not you are in fact counseling and whether you're treating seriously disturbed clients using your spiritual counseling. And if that's the case, then generally we'll accept the spiritual counseling.
It might be helpful, thank you, Alison, sorry, to look at the scope of practice and contrast it with counselling. As Alison said, counselling is deemed to be more general, information sort of sharing, giving, education, coaching, as opposed to psychotherapy, which is considered to be the assessment and treatment of cognitive, emotional, behavioural disturbances by therapeutic means through a therapeutic relationship based on verbal and non-verbal communication. So are you meeting with a client, are you assessing them in some format? Do you come up with a treatment plan for that client? What kind of issues are you working on that client with? Is it over a period of time, or are you just seeing them once or twice and that's it? That's the idea, or one of the underpinning ideas around the psychotherapeutic relationship. It's a process, it's development, it's ongoing. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
And that will be more clear once we have a better idea of what will fall under the Controlled Act. When all of that is defined, it will be, the distinction between the two will also likely become clearer.
So we've got a very grey area at this moment until that act is proclaimed.
Yeah, I mean, it's grey. It's grey. I can't really say anything.
Some counsellors are doing counselling, but it goes deep. And then there is some psychotherapy that happens that's not so deep. Right. So kind of there's some swings and roundabouts going on in the whole thing.
Right.
Okay. Right. Someone just said, so you just said about it being like coaching, counselling is tune in with coaching.
Sorry, say that again, John.
You just said that with the counselling definition,
yeah,
there's an element of coaching in it as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's not what psychotherapy would be.
No.
Right. Okay. So it's sometimes easier to find out what it's not.
Yeah.
Find what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just quickly add to that again? Like, for instance, that definition of psychotherapy, psychotherapist is a term that's only used in Ontario. In every other province, it's counselor. So it gets messy and muddy. But the main issue to think about is, I really think it's important that people get that while it looks intimidating to join the college, and believe me, for 5 years I've been sitting in on the council meetings and I've come out triggered to my eyeballs over and over and over again and wondered, why am I doing this to myself? You can get through it. But picture a scenario of this. You're working as a counselor. You're working with somebody who then suicides. The family decides to lodge a complaint, say you're doing work beyond your scope or whatever, even though it's unregulated. If the complaint is filed with our college, I believe they don't have any choice. They must investigate. That can tie you up for years. You don't need that. That's why I'm concerned, unless you're positive you're going to be at the shallow end of the pond all the time. It's really, really important to not look short term and think, oh, I can't cope with this, it's too stressful, or I can't cope with this because of the finances or whatever. There's help for, I don't know about the finances, that's something you got to work out in your own life, but there is help. As I mentioned, we have a lady we've connected to that was recommended to us by Sabine Cox, who was our go-to person, has now been kidnapped by the college and is not available to us. But there's people to help you through this process. Be patient, you can get through it. It's very, very concerning to me what might happen when if and when the Controlled Act comes in and how that could affect people. You just don't need that kind of grief. So that's all I wanted to say again. Thanks.
Yeah. And just to add to that, on behalf of the reviewers too, it's our job not to find reasons not to register you. It's our job to give you every opportunity to provide every piece of information possible to show what you're doing, whether or not it falls within the scope, whether or not you have the hours completed, and what you can do if you don't have what is required, what you can do. And the reviewers are here to answer all of your questions as well. You can always contact us and we can always provide you with that information. But before we can do anything with the application, we have to give you every single opportunity to complete the application to the best of your ability and provide all the information in detail possible to help you become registered.
There's a question. Well, it sounds like a comment. I'm not sure if it's a question or there's a couple of comments around a therapist never qualifying and fears of going out of business being real, and also therapeutic relationships, serious disorders, and psychotherapeutic techniques would, and I'm guessing that's Alcoholics Anonymous, would have to shut down when the controlled act is proclaimed. I'm guessing that, well, I'm not really sure how to address those comments.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have, say for an example, around communities. Mm-hmm. I'm just jumping on the bandwagon of that. Really, there's one in our local area that's women that have gone through sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. They're doing pretty deep work with some of these women. Mm-hmm. If they're a kind of voluntary charity group, what would be the case for them? Any ideas?
In the volunteer role, are they doing counseling and psychotherapy?
I'm just wondering about if they're just volunteer groups that are just gathering together that advertise as part of a community resource. Mm-hmm. Would they need to come under that legislation?
That sounds a bit more like peer support networks.
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in that case,
I'm thinking in terms of AA. Yes, they do form a therapeutic relationship, mm-hmm. But yeah, is it necessary that they come under the legislation as it stands?
No, I don't think so.
More peer group, yeah. Because there's they have sponsors, etc. It's someone that's been through what they're helping someone else through.
Yes.
Hope that answers the other person's question just there. Yeah, it's just another one popped in. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that AA is really psychotherapy. They're transmitting experience from one experienced person to another person that's learning. It's as much counselling and coaching. That's my pennyworth. Yeah.
Yeah, we would agree with that, John.
Yeah. I don't think you're doing any formal assessments.
Right, and I think that also that there is the whole sense of CRPO is attempting to be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Yes, we would support that view. As Alison has said, we do. There is a lot of back and forth with applicants who submit applications. We speak to them, we communicate in writing with them, we talk to them and try to sort of drill down. It's not just a one time, here's my application, oh well, you've missed out this information and it goes to pot. We don't do that. We spend a lot of time, and Alison could probably talk to you more about that in terms of hours of her day. But most of the applications that are coming in need some kind of back and forth communication, clarification. So it's not unusual for us to be doing that. We have to do a lot of it, and we're prepared to do that. That's what we're here for. As Alison said, we're not here to to find ways not to.
Yeah. So you're finding ways to include.
Yeah, and
is to exclude.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that too. I'm sorry, I'm breaking in because I think it's really important. I've been watching for 5 years, sitting in on the council meetings. I've gotten to know what's going on. And I've watched the staff and the transitional counselors, and I'm hoping the new people will do the same, bend over backwards to be helpful and inclusive. It's a difficult position because you guys are put in the position of being a regulator, that read policeman. And so people get into a reactive state. And I think that something that Sean Knight said to me one time really applies. He's one of the staff at and he said, I think I know why it's so tough for so many of you people. And I said, why? He said, because you're dealing in a different culture than you're used to dealing in. You're used to being therapists with a whole set of values and culture and how you interact. This is the world of regulation, laws, and legality. And you don't necessarily realize you're stepping into that other world, and it can feel very threatening. But in fact, as I have dealt with over the years with the council and with the staff, I have always found them super helpful and responsive. So I would encourage people not to get into the thing of paranoia around or fears. It's not necessary.
Yeah. I would like to add there that as counsellors, we need to deal with our authority issues, just in case we have some, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, okay?
Yeah, so and we're here to try and help you through the process as well. Yeah.
I think that really what we're looking at you, Monica, in your position, you've got a position, but actually you're a peer. Is that, yeah? You're one of us, basically, but you've been put in the manager role.
No, I'm not sure. What do you mean, one of us?
It's like you are not a aloof and lofty person.
Right, okay, yes.
You're going to apply for grandparenting. You should have the qualifications, both of you, fairly soon. That's another thing to remember, too, is that the college, we're in a very lucky situation, I think, in that the college, we're self-regulating. We're not part of the college is not part of the government. It's under the government's supervision, but many other jurisdictions have people put over them who are nothing to do with that discipline. In this case, all the members of the council are people who are experienced, and the staff is learning fast.
Yes.
So, we're self-regulating.
Yeah. It's an education process. It's I said, we are learning, as well as it's our duty to inform practitioners, psychotherapists, any prospective members of what regulation means, and once you're a member of the college, what that entails. The renewal process has just recently fed into that process. People were surprised that they registered last year and paid a registration fee, and now we were asking them again to pay another registration fee. We had that question a number of times, but yes, we need to educate people that yes, it's not just a one-time thing. This is a process, it's ongoing. Once you're a member of the college, you have to renew your registration annually, participate in the various programs that we have. So renewal is one process, but there's also the quality assurance process that feeds into professional development and ongoing learning.
What I wanted to say was that people need to understand about the fees, that the government does not supply the money to run the college.
Yeah.
All the colleges are self-supporting. So
Yeah.
the fees have to reflect what is necessary to run the college, depending on the number of people who are members. The more members there are, it's more possible to cut fees down a bit. But it's also important to remember that.
Yeah.
Right. And another way I'm kind of looking at this is that psychologists went through this process many moons ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of that transition and something growing into something of its own nature. And I think we're an organism that's being organized.
Something to remember too is that there's apparently only about 80,000 mental health workers of all types in the province. My own personal guess is there's only about 10,000 psychotherapists. and from all the colleges put together. And the thing is that according to the Canadian Mental Health Commission, anywhere up to between 2 to 3 million people in Ontario alone are having mental health issues this year. The more we get organized and professional, the more we should be able to make an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
In relation to what Philip just mentioned, that the mental health problem in Ontario alone is getting bigger and bigger. And the biggest concern that I can think of would be with the regulation of mental health professionals. There's already, even if, let's say, all of the mental health professionals are regulated, there's still not enough to actually fulfill the or address the problem, right? So with the regulation, my concern would be, would that actually really impact the services, existing services that is already going on in the community service level with the regulation of psychotherapy? Because just about anyone who deals with mental health will be treating in one way or another. We can call it any name, but we are doing a little. Counselors are doing treatment for sure. That's one thing for sure there. So so with that, with the Controlled Act and the legislation, I'm just wondering if that would actually have an impact to the services, the shortage of mental health professionals, even to address the mental health problems in Ontario. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts?
Right, so in terms of the impact, I think I sort of partially answered this question earlier. The college was created, or I said the government created the college, but the primary means of creating the college was to ensure that the clients had access to qualified professionals. So that's key, qualified. There are lots of people out there who can say, I do X, Y, and Z. But in the age that we're living in, all of us want to know, if I go to a doctor, I want to know that the doctor sitting on the other side of the table has passed some exams, is continuing to update his education, and I mean, particularly something now that I do since I've been sort of connected to the regulatory field is checking out my health professionals, checking their public registers, because I want to know that the people that I'm visiting for treatment are qualified to do that. So that's really where our focus is increasing access.
Yeah, I think it impacts the quality of service. And I think that we're ensuring that everybody, the high quality of service and the emphasis on quantity, we're registering people as quickly as we can, as soon as they are eligible, and they will become registered. There will be more and more and more as the years pass. But now there will be an increasing quantity, and also we'll establish that everybody who is registered is practicing with certain quality as well.
Correct. Thank you. According to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, what they're proposing is like different tiers of services. So maybe psychotherapy, psychologists, and all these regulated professionals can address the highest level of mental health issues, right? I can see that the quality can be really very important, but what about the peer counselors, the lower tier, the peer counselors and addiction counselors? Will they need to be regulated as well, I wonder?
Well, I think as we said earlier, counselling, we're not regulating counselling. We're regulating psychotherapy and the practice of psychotherapy. psychotherapists we're regulating. So the whole peer counsellor issue shouldn't be. I think Philip also mentioned earlier on that if you think that your work falls into the scope of practice and that you may be straying into doing the controlled act, then you should consider registering either with this college or one of the other 5 colleges whose members are also authorized to practice psychotherapy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
The question that just came up regarding people doing energy work. So that's just an interesting one. Could you put any light on that one?
Energy therapists are going to be affected because they're not able to meet the hours, and the courses are not in line with what they do. Yeah, threaten. Education mentioned is completely different from what they do, so it's without benefit. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what an energy therapist is doing. So
the actual energy therapist is probably it's a methodology, isn't it? A modality, rather than who they're actually applying it to. So it really is more about who you're applying it to, I'm supposing.
Right.
Whether the person's in need of psychotherapy, of deep work, or whether they're in need of counselling type work.
Yeah, that would be one distinction. I'm not familiar with the courses, but I'm assuming there aren't coherent programs that occur in energy, or the energy therapist team.
Right.
So again, maybe grandparenting. If you do that kind of work, then maybe consider looking at the grandparenting route as opposed to the regular route. Okay.
Because a person doesn't want to be that test case.
Yeah, as Philip says.
Yeah, because that test case is going to be awful for whoever it is.
Yeah, well, test cases are long and expensive, so yeah. Okay, John.
They get into the emotional deep end, so they do fall under the Act. Yes, so that's basically it. But they don't make it, then they're finished.